Ready, we'll do a check-in. Lisa, I can't see you guys. Well, just Lisa, Sam, and BQ, just do what you gotta do. And we'll start from three. Three, two. Hello everyone, JP Ward here. Gonna do a different video. I'm on a Zoom call. Everybody's on mute except for me. I'm recording the audio through our phones. There's about 3 or 4 different phones recording right now, and hopefully one of them will get it right. But I've got Sam and Lisa. They're my YouTube people. Not that I need YouTube people, but I just hate YouTube and I hate editing videos, and I'm over it. And they volunteered to organize my YouTube channels and do what they do on YouTube. And then I got BQ from the MARKOUT Nation podcast, who, if I get into the weeds, will wave to me and I'll unmute him and we'll take it from there. But I'd like to talk about my friendship that lasted 17 years with former WWF champion Bob Backlund, and the bizarreness, the goodness, the crappiness, the experiences, wonderful experiences, downright lame experiences, and here we go. Me and Bob Backlund, when I was 15 years old, were pen pals. And I was pen pals with him until about the spring of 1999. And we just wrote letters back and forth. And I'd tell him about my goals. I'd ask him about wrestling. He'd recommend books to me. Napoleon Hill books. Greatest Salesman in Babylon, Millionaire Next Door. And when I first started writing to him, he was still under contract with the WWF. He was managing the Sultan. And he had done some live wire appearances, which I thought were hysterical. And I really got into his later work in the 90s because I was a comedy guy. I was a wrestling person too, but I was also a comedy guy. So he was kind of like the perfect mix of wrestler and comedian before that was like a thing, because the Mr. Backlund character was funny. It was a comedy act. It was, comic relief, especially after he dropped the belt. It turned into more of a comic relief type wrestling comedian kind of thing. And he was loud, and loud people are funny. And, so fast forward to, say, like April of 1999, on Monday morning, he announced that he was running for Congress, and it was in the papers and on the news and everything. And Wednesday afternoon, he showed up in my computer graphics class, and we were walking through the halls of my high school. First time I ever met him in person. And we're just walking through the halls of my high school, and he asked me to be his personal assistant for his campaign. This is in 1999. He was going to be running in 2000. So he had like this year and a half worth of potential work that I was going to be doing for him. I didn't know what that was going to entail or how that was going to work, or if I was going to get paid, or what it was even going to be. And long story short, I graduated high school, walked across the stage, and at the bottom of the stairs of the stage I just graduated on, in front of a couple thousand people, my peers, my town folk, friends, family, fellow students, was Bob. And he gave me a big handshake and a hug and said, "Let's get to work." And I didn't really know, again, I didn't know what that meant, but we, 2 weeks later, we're at Monday Night Raw, and I got my arm around the McMahons, and we're going on tour with the WWE for the next year and a half, selling t-shirts, raising money for Backlund 2000, Bob Backlund's run for Congress. And it was interesting. Eventually, I'd be put in charge of a street team of about 5 people, 5 guys that I knew. We'd all get them gigs on, just get them into radio stations and hit public access shows and into the college campuses, and we'd go in someplace before he was going to show up and wreak a little havoc, fairs and concerts, and hand out flyers and cards and t-shirts and everything else. And it was a bizarre time because I didn't really know anything about politics. I just knew that I was really for Bob becoming a congressman. The first district of Connecticut, congressional district of Connecticut, is the most gerrymandered district in the country, and Bob in reality never had a chance. There's this buffoon, egotistical cunt named John Larson, who's our congressman, and that's who Bob was going up against. And Bob got 28% of the vote, and just to put that in perspective, the average is 33. The highest was 41 in the last 20 years, between 2000 and 2020. So nobody voted for Bob. None of the people that shakes his hand every day, and the kids that he talks to, and the YMCAs that he volunteers for, and all the civic organizations that he volunteers for, and the parades that he goes to, and and that was kind of sad because we have a whore in Congress where we could have had a real man. And I think Bob was down about that once he lost the election, and he went into businesses over the years, kind of made sporadic appearances for wrestling, but nothing major until about 2013 when he went to the Hall of Fame. I think if the wrestling appearances that he did make were in Connecticut, they were away from Harford County. One of the things that we did towards the end of the campaign around Election Day was we had a rally at a big nightclub in my hometown, and I was basically put in charge of it. And I knew it wasn't going to draw any money or draw any crowds or anything like that, so I had to spice it up a little bit, and I called a couple of the indie promoters around the state and invited them to the rally, and their indie champions and their top indie workers, wrestlers in Southern New England, and a couple of the ECW guys showed up. And after Bob lost the election, I went to work for them. These public access people, these radio station people, these independent professional wrestling personalities that all knew me through Bob, all asked me if I wanted a job, and I said yes to everybody. And I was knee deep in that stuff, and at one point I had applied to Johnson & Wales, private school in Rhode Island, and I told Bob about it, and he wanted to bring me to the orientation. I was, yeah, that'd be great. And we drove up there, and we're just talking on the way up, and we stopped at Tim White's bar, Friendly Tap, and, I'm like 19, I'm drinking at the Friendly Tap, and, with Bob Backlund and Tim White and all the memorabilia on the walls and everything, and I thought it was really cool. So we go to the orientation, and I sit down, with my contact at the school, and I say, give it to me straight. This is the degree I want. I want to go into this master's program. What's this going to run me at the end of the day? Because I'm broke. I'm an intern for about 3 different entertainment groups in Connecticut. They're not paying me. I work part-time, retail. My parents don't have any money. This is all going to be loans and credit cards and everything else. So what's the tuition for this, and this? And it was going to be over $250,000 just for that degree. And there was no way in hell that was going to happen when I was 19. And there's probably no way in hell it's ever going to happen ever, even for a house or car or, anything like that, let alone, the degree. And the degree was actually pretty good. It was arts and entertainment management, with a master's in, with like an MBA. And it's not that I didn't have confidence in my ability to achieve that. I just wasn't going to borrow $250,000 just to hang out in fucking South Providence and not be around wrestling and comedy and broadcasting and all the things that I had started to do and just had gotten my foot in the door. And me and Bob are driving home from Providence. I kind of laid that out to him, and he said, if you achieve the degree, I'll see what I can do and get you a job down at WWF down in Stanford, and after you graduate. And I said to the effect of, that's very nice, but I don't have $250,000 to get a degree, and I'm never going to make that back. Like, I mean, I'm never going to pay that off. I mean, no. No. And again, I said something to the effect of, I'd rather jump on the trucks. And I'd rather get on the ring crew for the guys. I don't want to be in an office anyway. I like to travel, and I don't mind the blue collar end of wrestling. I'm doing it anyway. I'm setting up rings and sets and striking sets and rings and, being a liaison for people and everything anyway, just a gopher for a couple different companies and stuff. Like, I mean, why not just throw me on a truck? And like most things in this nature that me and Bob had conversations about, it just kind of faded away, and it usually ends up with him putting on a tape of Napoleon Hill or some bizarre motivational tape, and we never talk about it ever again. And I know that motivational tapes mean a lot to him, but they don't to me. At the end of the day, action and I guess a bit of nepotism, works for me. So time went on, a couple years went by, and I hadn't really talked to him that much. I'd moved to Vermont to be a glassblowing apprentice. I had done some indies and broadened out into New England, outside of Connecticut, and I had started my own little production company, making the JP Ward Show and the Ozone Hour, sketch comedy, and just whatever wrestling company would let me use their footage as like a double feature thing for public access. And Bob caught wind that I knew how to edit, and a couple of his cronies had caught wind that I knew how to edit, some wannabe money men, money marks, producers, whatever. And they all wanted me to make them look good. And at that point, I had already kind of made people look good, and I was more interested in, working on my career. And there was an indie company up in Maine that he wanted me to work for as a manager, but he also wanted me to be an editor, and no. The people he were working for had a really bad reputation, and they were using him and his money mark friend and a couple other money marks and just people that I had already been around and been there and done that. And, Bob had kind of got into business. He was a bail bondsman for a while. He did some private banking for a while. And then eventually he bought a home heating oil truck and he made home heating oil deliveries. No, entrepreneurial stuff, just more of a self-employed type gigs. He kind of bought jobs instead of businesses and investments. They were safer, and he's very safe with his money. And, and people would placate him. I think Kevin Ndegaro and Maria Menounos kind of played to his weaknesses about his, stroking his ego, and he kind of knew it but didn't acknowledge it and just played along. There were a couple people around him, a producer, a radio guy, that were just lucky sperm and wannabes. A couple hanger-ons. So I didn't really want to be any of that stuff to him. So most of the time, we just kind of kept it as we would have breakfast on Friday mornings or something. You know what I mean? Depending on what part of town I was living in or what he had going on or what the season it was or whatever. And I sprung on him one day and said, hey, I'm moving to California next week and I just wanted to say bye and thank you for, inspiring me and getting me in good with, the indies and the radio shows and the experiences that you let me have and meeting Vince and The Rock and a bunch of the guys from the Attitude Era and the ECW guys and stuff. And we just shook hands and hugged, and that was the last time I saw him for 6 or 7 months. And then we had a mutual friend that passed away, and he told me that he was going into the Hall of Fame. He gave me a ride to the funeral, and we were just talking. I said, God, good, that's great. It should have happened a long time ago. And he asked me if I wanted to write a blurb for his book, just a little paragraph that he could put into his book that he was writing with a lawyer. I mean, the guy that wrote his book with him is a lawyer, so I kind of knew where that thing was going. And I came back at him and I said, hey, I'm not really living high on the hog here. Can you make a phone call? A phone call to anybody just to get me a paying gig. I can do a lot of things and he, again, put on the Napoleon Hill tape and we just had the whole awkward, silence. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to write something in your book when I'm living in my mom's basement on fucking food stamps. That's ridiculous. That makes you look bad. That makes me look like a fucking, I don't even know. What would you even call that, right? So the Hall of Fame came around and I didn't go. I could have went. I had the opportunity to go and I just didn't go. I just didn't care. It would have been cool to see Trump and Schwarzenegger and, Bruno get in and Bob but I saw the tape of the show a few months later, and during his induction ceremony, he calls out this kid from the audience that lives in his hometown who's a lucky sperm and had been paying Bob to teach him, little tricks and whatever with amateur wrestling. He didn't know this kid for 17 years like I knew him. It was just some lucky sperm, some rich kid from Bob's hometown that the kid was paying Bob to hang out with. They only knew for a couple months. He called him out at his Hall of Fame speech, you know what I mean? And he said, oh, Triple H, you got to hire more amateur wrestlers like this kid and he's not going to regress. And as soon as he said that, I was like, you know what? That was a shot at me. He's not going to regress. That was a total shot at me. So, like I said, this is like a couple months after the Hall of Fame, and I picked up the phone and I called him at his house, and he didn't answer. I got super pissed that he didn't answer. I just like reamed him out on his answer machine. I was like, "Don't ever call me again." I was like hung up, and like that was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, and I haven't talked to him ever since. And I know that he's been selling his book out in the parking lot of WWE events and tailgates and stuff. And I skimmed through his book, and it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. A self dick sucking, and and people don't want to read that kind of stuff. They never have. I mean, you look at someone like Schwarzenegger's book, and it's like an amazing tale of how the guy got to be where he is, the good, the bad, the ugly. It wasn't censored by a lawyer, and just all this, bullshit. And it's really sad because I look at this picture of me and him when I'm 17 years old in the lobby of East Harvard High School, my high school, and that was the day that he picked me out of class and asked me to work for him. And just this kind of like journey that I went on the next 15 or so years that had him in my ear the whole time when I was in the arts. And I don't know, it was sad. It was sad that our friendship had to end. I've heard different things from different people about his health, his mental state, and just his behavior over the last couple of years. So who really knows what the truth is? I don't really care, to be honest with you. I would say what he did for me was to have standards in my life as far as what I'm going to accept for friends, what I'm going to accept for work ethic, what I'm going to accept for how to handle money, what to do for money, what not to do for money. And you wouldn't think that because I'm 40 and I'm broke and I don't have a pot to piss in. I really don't have much of a future. But there's little like stubbornness that he had. Well, he had a lot of stubbornness. He was very egotistical and he was a loner. And I can be a loner and I'm stubborn. But I think what defies him to people that know him, not just lucky sperm that want to hang out with him, but the people that actually get involved with him on a work basis, people that go to work for him one way or the other, is he's beyond egotistical and he builds people up just to tear them down. And that would probably be the definition of my relationship with Bob Backlund from 1996 to 2013, unfortunately. All right, I'm going to leave it at that because